Welcome to the Colorado Rockies franchise on MLB The Show 21. We have completed the first offseason in the series. I streamed it live on Saturday. I'll have it linked. It has timestamps if you want to watch the live version and all the detail in there. But today I'm recapping everything and showing you what I've done leading up to spring training. After becoming the worst team in baseball, I was obviously excited to revamp the roster, but we were also going to be making some changes to our coaching staff, with manager Bud Black retiring. I was probably going to be firing him if he didn't, and we had our third base coach retire. Ultimately, we're going into season 2 with a brand new coaching staff. For retirements, Ian Desmond decides to retire along with Jack Wincoop. There weren't a lot of big name retirements. Rich Hill, Jay Happ, Kurt Suzuki, Jed Lowry, but we did have Albert Pujols retire and become the only player from this year to end up making the Hall of Fame. I hadn't done much leading up to the offseason in regards to re-signing players, so we had some free agents to take care of. I was interested in re-signing John Gray and Michael Givens and possibly CJ Cron or Chris Owings. And at this point, we have plenty of money to spend. Charlie Blackmon's contract is the only really big one on the team right now. So Michael Givens, I decided to offer him a 2-year deal with a player option, $10 million. The idea was that Givens ultimately could become our closer instead of Daniel Bard. Then we get here to the coach hiring phase, and we see that Dave Roberts is available after winning back-to-back World Series titles. Joe Madden, who just brought the Angels to the World Series, is also available. I thought about offering to Dave Roberts, basically a top-tier manager, great ratings boost. He will be one of the more expensive managers to hire. I didn't think it would be very realistic for him to come to Colorado, plus you still have to actually get him to accept a deal. I wasn't sure if he'd be interested in coming to Colorado anyway, so I ended up firing the entire coaching staff that didn't retire so we could start over and look for certain ratings boosts that I cared about. So I was very interested in the managers just below Dave Roberts and Joe Madden, still had some good ratings boosts. I wanted to offer to Anthony Meeks, only 39 years old, good boost to K per 9 and velocity. We offered him the manager job at about $6 million a year. And then we go back to free agency because I'm all over the place in the offseason. I wanted to bring back John Gray. I thought he was asking for a little too much money, but we have plenty of it with this team, and I didn't want to lose at least a decent starting pitcher that we already had. So we start to make some moves here with the coaching staff, and instead of becoming our manager, Anthony Meeks will become the Royals pitching coach. I wasn't expecting that, so now we have to go look for another manager candidate, and there are some offers already out there, and we found Louis Leonard, who had an offer from San Francisco to be their hitting coach. I like the speed and reaction boosts here, so we offered him the manager job, and he took it. So here's ultimately the coaching staff that we're going into the season with. Louis Leonard, boost to speed, reaction, and clutch. Hitting coach Horace Vickers, boost to speed, clutch, plate vision, and contact. Then pitching coach Jeff Bliss. We do lose 3 on break, but gain 3 for home run per 9, some K per 9, and some stamina. Those are very important ratings. Seth Delaney, first base coach, fielding, blocking, reaction. Gerald Cornell, speed, blocking, arm strength, and reaction. And our farm director, David Sanchez, gives a boost to blocking, plate vision, control, and clutch. A lot better ratings boost than the previous coaching staff. So that is all set. Everybody's on a 3-year deal. And then we get into free agency, and I didn't actually realize it until Noah Syndergaard signed with the Tigers. He probably would have been somebody I'd have interest in offering to. He's 28 years old, and you'd hope by the time he's 30, 31, this team would be competitive, but he's going to Detroit. I still wanted to add a good starting pitcher this offseason, and here were the best free agents. Syndergaard was really the only top option that was under 30 years old, and majority of these pitchers were in their mid-30s. We then go to set the 40-man roster, again just going all over the place in the offseason. Wanted to make sure this was set up for the Rule 5 draft and not potentially losing certain players. So I have the 40-man roster in a spot that I like. I had to add Zach Veen because the roster had him Rule 5 eligible. Obviously, I have to make sure nobody signs him away. And then we had to worry about these tender contracts and arbitration, so I could see just how much money we actually had to spend in free agency. There wasn't a lot of drama here. We ended up signing a handful of players to some multi-year deals, Brendan Rodgers, Sam Hilliard, but these contracts in the game of baseball, you pretty much know players are coming back. It's just a matter of, is it a one-year deal? Is it multi-year? Do you go to arbitration or not? So this is the part of the off-season stream that's probably not as fun to watch, especially the renewable contracts. While they can be easier for the minor leaguers that have never played at the major league level, there's also like 60 of them. So a lot of contracts to go through. We eventually got through it, and then on to all of the arbitration eligible players, and here's where you have to make a few more tough decisions, and you have to keep morale in mind as well. You don't just want to get them to sign a multi-year deal and then they become underpaid because they develop and then they're unhappy with their contracts. As you add or remove years in the deals too, you'll notice the interest really change for players. So you can be a lot more creative with your contract structures in this game, especially if you give them, say, a player option and not tack on too many extra years. We did offer arbitration to a handful of players. This is where you'll offer an amount basically, and they'll have their own amount that they want, and then an arbitrator will decide between the two which is more reasonable. Some of these players, though, were already getting paid a lot of money, and I didn't necessarily want to bring them back at these higher salaries. Kyle Freeland was already making $5 million last year, so I have to offer him something within 80% if I'm trying to go under that, and ultimately I just didn't offer him a contract. So we are moving on from a few of these players. But I did offer contracts to players like Chichi Gonzalez, Elias Diaz. At the same time, I wanted to leave some roster spots open so we could make some moves in free agency and have space as well for potential Rule 5 pickups, which we'll get to later. A lot of these veterans, though, I just let go. Chris Russin, Greg Bird, Daniel Bard. I didn't think that their seasons last year were all that great. So we are definitely making some roster spots available. And now to free agency. The Braves got to decide between Trevor Story, Freddie Freeman. They also want Clayton Kershaw. So they're set to spend a whole lot of money. And I wanted to figure out who exactly we could go after. Chat was very excited about Javi Baez being available. There weren't a ton of stars available, but definitely some chances for us to get better. The starting pitcher market wasn't what I had in mind, especially missing out on Syndergaard, but easily my favorite option here was last year's American League Cy Young winner, Andrew Heaney. He's 30 years old, 82 overall, higher overall than anybody on our entire 90-man roster. He's a lefty, we don't have many of those. He gets strikeouts, he's been limiting power the last couple years. I felt like he was a perfect addition to go after. We would have to offer something around $17 million a season, and because we have plenty of space, this is a move I wanted to make. I promised him the role of being this team's ace, and that definitely helped get some interest, so we gave him a $48.5 million offer. Now, outfield is another spot I really wanted to address, and there were a lot more veterans than younger players to potentially sign. Not many players here under 30. There were some players that might have been more interesting last year, but they had regressed too much. Michael Conforto, you might remember him from my Twins franchise, where he was a big part of our rebuild. He was a great signing for us. I also like Avisail Garcia if we want to get some more power in the lineup. and then Nomar Mazara at 26 years old. So you would still project him to get a bit better. He has a really good arm, he does hit for power, so he was the main outfielder I wanted to target. A big part of it was just considering this team's timetable. I didn't want to sign a lot of older veterans. I obviously wanted Heaney, and I didn't really have other options for starting pitcher that were younger. So Nomar Mazara I thought was a perfect player to go after, really good defense. So we offered him a $5 million contract, or $5 million per year contract. And then going back to Javi Baez. The Cubs still wanted him back for around $6 million a season. Baez hits for a lot of power. He's 29 years old. He has some position flexibility. It took me a little while thinking about it, but the more I thought about it, I felt like Baez would be a really good fit. Many thought that this would kind of be a more unrealistic signing, but if you look at what he did last year, hitting 22 home runs in 216, it's not like he's hitting the market playing at a superstar level. He has elite defensive ratings, great power, and the upside at that contract value is immense. The Braves end up signing Clayton Kershaw to a 7-year, $209 million deal, which means they lose out on Freddie Freeman. He goes to the Nationals. Here in this transaction screen, we see they also keep Trevor Story on a 6-year, $160 million deal. And then a couple days later, it shows that the Rockies sign Andrew Heaney. 3 years, $48.5 million. We have a new starting pitcher that will be our ace going into the new year. 82 overall. I'm really excited to see what this can do for our rotation. Going back to managing the roster, there were a few more things I had to do to the 40-man roster, so there are some players here being waived, like Jordan Sheffield. I wanted to make sure that we had spots for that Rule 5 draft. And there were some players that I hadn't re-signed, I didn't want to re-sign, but were still taking up a spot on the 40-man roster, so I had to remove them. Going back to free agency again and waiting to see if any more deals get accepted. Brad Hand goes to the Braves, 2 years, $30 million. Carlos Correa gets a big deal going to the Diamondbacks, 6-year, $102 million. We still had the best offer for Javi Baez. The Angels were now interested, but our offer was just more interesting, and Baez ultimately will be coming to the Rockies, and I'm extremely excited about this signing. First off, it's a 3-year deal at $6.5 million a season. That third year is actually a player option, so I'm treating it more like a 2-year contract, but I think this makes a ton of sense because Baez didn't have a great year last season. It's decent, but you're not going to get superstar money with those numbers. So in trying to improve his contract market, he gets to prove himself now for 2 years at least in Colorado, where at this altitude, he could hit a bunch of home runs, hit the market again in 2 years, and maybe get much more money. And for us, I mean, to get a player as talented as Baez for $6.5 million is a huge win. Maybe he doesn't hit for a high average, but I wanted more home runs, and this should help us be more competitive. With the signings of Andrew Heaney and Javi Baez, it was time to go look at the reliever market. Again, we're pretty much looking at just veterans here. We had to start filling out this roster, so I gave out some 1-year offers to veterans like Darren O'Day, who's 39 years old. He may retire after this season. And then I gave a 1-year offer to veteran Pedro Strop, who is 36 years old. Ultimately, relievers don't usually get huge contracts, but I wanted to find some quality players that would help us at least field the bullpen. Nomar Mazara will go to the A's instead, 3.9 for 1 year, a faster turnaround to hitting the market again, a chance to play for a better team as well. So back to free agency once again to find a potential outfielder, and I was really interested in veteran Adam Duvall. A lot of position flexibility, and a lot of power as well. He's hit 140 career home runs, just hit 27 last year in Miami. Hits lefties extremely well. So a one-year deal to come hit some home runs just like CJ Cron did last year. That's the way I look at that offer. Max Scherzer ends up going to the Orioles, who ended up making a ton of signings in this offseason. And we do get contracts accepted by Darren O'Day and Pedro Strop. We sim into mid-December, and here we have the Rule 5 draft. So this is a draft that is for players that are all at the minor league level but are not on the 40-man roster, and I think have like 4 or 5 years of professional experience. Some players do have an issue here on the roster where they're Rule 5 eligible and they shouldn't be. But it's a bit like signing somebody off an opposing practice squad in the NFL. The catch here in the Rule 5 draft is that these players have to stay on your active roster all season, or their contract will revert back to the team that you drafted them from. So you only want to select players that you plan on having on your team all season. And Yonny Chirinos was definitely intriguing, 27-year-old starting pitcher from the Rays. So we'll be looking to see if he can become part of our rotation this year. Now, the way the Rule 5 draft works is that the draft will go until nobody's made a selection for a full round. The draft can go as long as 40 rounds. So you could potentially do a Rule 5 rebuild where you build an entire team out of only Rule 5 draft picks. Gotta say, that sounds like fun. I may have to do that at some point on the second channel. In the second round, Sir Anthony Dominguez was still available. I was shocked he didn't go in the first round. So this was a really easy choice. We have to find some new pitchers for this bullpen, and Dominguez is drafted. We go to the third round, and we did see here George Valera was available. He really shouldn't have been. He shouldn't be Rule 5 eligible, so I didn't want to take him away from the Giants. In my Twins franchise, I had a chance to do the same exact thing with Ronald Acuna. Shouldn't have been able to do so, and ultimately we're not going to make that move. But we did want to bring in a utility player, and Jose Peraza was available. I was surprised he was, but he can play so many different positions. He has good speed, so that was another really easy choice for us. And the Rule 5 draft ended up going 3 rounds long. And those 3 players will have to stay on the active roster all year, or they're going back to their previous teams if they want to bring them back. We have the arbitration hearings going on in December as well. We won a couple of these arbitration deals, but lost a couple. They weren't significant. And ultimately, here is a look at the Major League depth chart going into spring training. We did get Adam Duvall signed as well. So I was able to pretty much accomplish my main goals with this offseason. I wasn't expecting a signing like Javi Baez, but I'm excited about it. Ryan McMahon moves to first base. Brendan Rodgers will play second with Baez at short. Garrett Hampson stays in the outfield. In left field, we're going to have Hilliard play some, Adam Duvall, Raimel Tapia. Duvall can also back up third base. He's going to start against lefties. And one thing I talked about in the offseason is now with some of this depth, we definitely have a deeper roster now. This may make a Charlie Blackmon trade make more sense. If I feel like instead of him playing every day, we'd be better off having Hilliard there in right, and then it's Duvall and Tapia figuring out left field, that's a possibility, but it's going to be all based on performance, so no sense in worrying about it too much right now. Overall, though, Javi Baez, Andrew Heaney, best 2 players on the team from an overall rating perspective. I think the team got a lot better. The starting lineup should be a lot more interesting this year. We have some options coming off the bench. I think we just added a lot of depth with the moves we made in this offseason. I also had to make a lot of moves for our minor league system. There were a lot of prospects I didn't bring back, so that's going to be a process as we go through more drafts. Here we have our first pick, David Geronimo. I'm planning on having him begin at AA. He does have 73 overall, so it shouldn't take long for him to make it to the major league level. The other draft picks are all going to be starting out at A, I believe. I did edit the roster here, so AA and AAA are pretty much already set up, and we have the required depth at all positions. Took me a while to get this 90-man roster set, but it is good to go now. Really excited to get into year 2, to check out some of these brand new prospects, to hopefully have a more competitive, entertaining team. We still have a long way to go, but I think we took some good steps this offseason. One more move I wanted to make was potentially signing Yusei Kikuchi. I really like him in real life from the Mariners, and the Twins ended up signing him, I believe, to just play in the bullpen for $13.7 million. I wasn't looking to go quite that high with the contract offer. We have $30 million in space right now, and I think I managed the contracts and everything pretty well in this offseason. The Heaney deal's big. Maybe it ends up not being great, but it shouldn't hurt us very much if it does go wrong. And with the Javi Baez contract, there's basically no risk in that contract. Worst thing would be that he would regress, hit 200, not a ton of home runs, and he picks up that option to get that extra year of $6.5 million, which isn't going to hurt this team. So, spring training's coming up next. I'm looking to do 1 or 2 episodes in here. I will probably get around to some streaming, and then make an episode where I'm compiling spring training highlights, talking about the position battles, what players are breaking out, who's potentially disappointing. So let me know what you're most excited to see in this spring training. Who should we focus on? And let me know what you thought of the first offseason in the series. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel, and there's more Rockies on the way. Have a great day, everybody.